All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Father Tony Green. I am the Director of Pastoral Care and Volunteer Services here at Ellis Medicine. And I also serve on the leadership team with the Diversity, Health Equity, and Inclusion Committee here at Ellis. So I'm happy to welcome our distinguished guest. And before I do their introduction, I'd just like to give a PSA that we've got another presentation coming up next week on PTSD. We have Dr. Maggie Guglielmi from the Veterans Hospital in Albany coming to speak about that. So you can find a registration link on the internet, or it'll be going out again by email this afternoon. So feel free to register for that. It's going to be a very interesting presentation as well. But today we're talking about Juneteenth, and we've got local experts with us. We have Reverend Nicolle Harris, and we have Dr. Diedre Butler. And I'll introduce Pastor Nikki as she's called first. And Pastor Nikki attended Delaware State University, where she received a bachelor's degree in primary education with a minor in theater. She's also a graduate of the Theological School at Drew University in Madison, New Jersey, where she earned her Master's of Divinity degree. In November of 2013, Reverend Nikki was elected to the Asbury Park Board of Education in Asbury Park, New Jersey, where she served for 3 years, serving as both president and vice president. On January 16th of 2011, Reverend Harris delivered her trial sermon under her pastor and spiritual father, Reverend Lester Washington Sr., at St. John AME Zion Church in Lakewood, New Jersey. In October of the same year, she became a licensed local pastor in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, receiving her license from presiding elder Reverend Dr. Lawton Nelson Jr. In May of 2016, she was ordained as an itinerant deacon in the life of the church under Bishop Lewis Hunter Sr. And in October of 2019, she was ordained an elder by the hand of Bishop Dennis V. Proctor in Stamford, Connecticut. While at Drew University, Pastor Nicolle did her internship at the Church Center for the United Nations in New York City under the tutelage of Reverend Diane Boissiere, the first African-American chaplain to the United Nations, and traveled to South Africa as part of her cross-cultural studies. In June of 2018, Pastor Nikki was appointed as the supply pastor of Prince Memorial AME Zion Church in Atlantic City, New Jersey, where she served until May of 2019. The following year, Pastor Nikki was appointed as pastor of Diedre Memorial AME Zion Church in Schenectady, New York on July 7th, 2019. On February 11th, 2021, the Schenectady chapter of the NAACP installed Reverend Nikki as president. She is the founder and owner of Nicolle D. Harris and Company, a nonprofit startup firm that helps individuals start 501c3 organizations. Let me just admit a couple of people before we get going here. Okay. So secondly, we have Dr. Diedre Butler, as she's an associate professor of sociology and former director of the Africana Studies program. She is also the current director of Faculty Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, the chief academic diversity officer at Union College. She has published in several interdisciplinary journals and teaches social justice related courses. She is a member of the Diedre AME Zion Church in Schenectady, New York, Delta Mu Omega graduate chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the Greater Albany chapter of Jack and Jill of America, and the Schenectady chapter of the NAACP. She is on the boards of SAFE Inc. and COCOA House Incorporated. She is married to Alan Butler Sr., bonus mom to 4 young adults, and birth mother to 2 teenage sons who attend Schenectady High School. So we welcome you both. We are so happy to have you here and share your knowledge and expertise to help us learn and grow together. So you may begin at your leisure.
You may begin at your leisure. We're like, okay, we'll just talk because we talk all the time. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with my pastor. I appreciate that. Usually people ask me or have asked us, what is Juneteenth? And why are we celebrating it now? What do you do to celebrate it? Who should celebrate it? How do you acknowledge it? What makes it such a timely time to celebrate it? So I guess I'll ask all those questions to my pastor. So why do you celebrate Juneteenth? What is your definition for what is Juneteenth? And we can go back and forth.
So why I celebrate Juneteenth is because I do consider it to be a more honest Independence Day for myself and for and not just myself, but really for the real history of our country. I've always known 4th of July was not Independence Day for me. Actually, my parents' wedding anniversary is on the 4th of July. So I always celebrated the 4th of July, but just not in the way that other people did. For me, it was about my parents. It was never really about independence. And just the dates alone, right? It's like, okay, well, on that particular date, my ancestors were not free. So it wasn't an Independence Day. For me, Juneteenth is more of an Independence Day. Why now? I think that a more transparent and honest narrative of American history is starting to push forward. And I'm glad about that. Some of it is not pretty, but it is honest, and it's what we need so that we're able to learn where we've been for a lot of reasons, so that we collectively as a nation can take pride in who we are now, and also so that we don't repeat some of the mistakes that we've made, and to learn from the mistakes we made still.
I
Yes.
agree with that. So I'll just read something quickly to add. So on June 19th, 2021, we hope to be joining the national celebration and observation of Juneteenth. So Juneteenth combines June and 19th, is also referred to as Emancipation Day or Juneteenth Independence Day. While Juneteenth is not yet a federal holiday, New York joins 40 other states and communities in observing Juneteenth as a public holiday. Texas was the first state to celebrate the holiday back in 1979, when the state passed Juneteenth as a holiday. Juneteenth commemorates a second Independence Day in the history of the United States. On June 19th, 1865, more than 2 years after the 1863 signing of the Emancipation Proclamation by President Abraham Lincoln, which declared more than 3 million slaves living in the Confederate States to be free, the last enslaved Africans finally learned that that slavery had been abolished. So Major General Gordon Granger led more than 1,800 federal troops to Galveston, Texas, confirming the freedom of Americans in the deepest part of the Confederate South. So Juneteenth not only celebrates and recognizes a 2-year period during which Black people were wrongly enslaved, but it's the hundreds of years before and after the Emancipation Proclamation, when chattel slavery existed in the continental United States. So on this day, on Saturday, and for many years since Juneteenth, celebrates this promises or helps to celebrate and recognize the struggle and all the efforts towards freedom and liberation. So I agree wholeheartedly with Reverend Nikki when she says, we're still in this process of emancipation, of recognizing what freedom is. This is just a date that commemorates what happened in the past, but severely relevant to us today, given the last year that we've had since the murder of George Floyd and the racial reckoning that's come to pass, with people understanding that racial issues and topics are still a struggle. And the lack of understanding isn't a mistake. It was very intentional. So this knowledge and learning about past omissions is something we all should be striding and trying to change.
Would it be okay if I answer Mrs. Sister Lois Mitchell's question?
Sure.
Okay. Do you think Congress is willing to make this a national holiday in order to be done with the discussion of racism? Do I think Congress is willing to make this a national holiday? Congress. I am not sure about that. The reason why is that I recently was listening to discussions about them having trouble with educating us on Black history. So I'm like, are they willing to make it a holiday? Remember when they were trying to make Martin Luther King Day a holiday? And we had to go through all that stuff.
Yes.
And then Stevie Wonder came out with a song, very catchy song.
Came the unofficial happy birthday song.
Right, a happy birthday song, but if you listen to the beginning of the song, we always sing the chorus of that song, but you remember, listen to the beginning of it, Stevie Wonder is really shaming the country, going, why wouldn't somebody have a holiday for Martin Luther King? So, and you look at what the discussions that they'll be having about Juneteenth on the floor, and you go, it makes sense that we would celebrate the day that all of the slaves were free, and what we want it to be is the day that all citizens of the United States were free, or of the of the United States were free. But we were having a discussion, actually jumped from Bible study here, and Sister Lois, you were on Bible study, so okay, what I'm talking about.
And I wasn't, so that's a shame.
Right, it's okay. But we were talking about, that really this whole idea of freedom and everyone in the country being free is coming in works of different stages. We're not really, okay, if we're going to make Juneteenth a holiday, which I think would be great, I would celebrate it, I would take off from work, that's it, yes, make it a holiday, right? But the thing is, until we look at the 13th Amendment, everybody's not free. We've got people in prison right now who are literally in slavery. There's people in jail because they can't afford to get out. They're poor, and we look at the disparities as far as how many people of color, how many brown people, how many, whoever are in prison right now. Can we really say that freedom is realized for all people in the country? And so making it a holiday, while that would be nice, we still have a lot of work to do. So do I think they're willing to do it? I think they're willing to have a discussion about it, but we might have to make up a song again.
I think you're right about that. I mean, and having the holiday should also happen in tandem with more discussions about what is freedom. Frederick Douglass said more than 100 years ago, what does the 4th of July mean to me? Right? It's not a freedom day for me. And so Juneteenth should be a time for dialogue, discussions, and strategizing for more actions to say, what are the realities, where are the gaps that we still have in regards to having spaces for everyone to realize and have choices for mobility, elevating their dreams, their goals, quality education, access to healthcare, these basic rights that the country is grounded on, founded in, and to know that the individuals who weren't even thought about when the country was formed to be participants in the system are here, and our numbers are growing. And there's a lot of backlash to having these discussions about what freedom is and who should have freedom, who should have choices. And so constant dialogues, at least having this acknowledgement of the day, similar to Black History Month, when you're recognizing contributions of citizens who've toiled hard and heavy and contributed in very various ways, it's bringing to our recognition that we still have a lot of work to do, and holds us accountable to make those changes happen.
Also, I did want to also mention that I really didn't learn about Juneteenth until I was an adult. Growing up in the North, I'm from New Jersey. My friends from down South are far more familiar with Juneteenth than I am. So I didn't learn about it until I probably was in my 30s.
Okay.
And I was like, what? And same way, and it felt kind of like, well, it was like hidden from you,
Hidden and
right?
betrayed. You feel a little
Right,
betrayed at the same
yes,
time that you
you
didn't know.
do.
My initial encounter with Juneteenth, I was a Girl Scout leader in Ithaca, New York, when I was in graduate school at Cornell. And there's a community center called the Southside Community Center. And we had a festival, and I still have the t-shirt downstairs somewhere. I'm talking to you from my home. Um, that basically said, we had the celebration. I'm here serving ice cream to little children and talking to community members and seeing that everyone came out for this festive occasion. And this is 1992, so I'm telling my age here. And I was wondering, what is this? So I too was an adult, not knowing, but then also understanding that this has a legacy of just our struggles and strife. And someone else asked a question about, does Juneteenth have a connection to the Black National Anthem? And you would say on the surface, no, it doesn't. Two different times, two different situations, but yes, it does, because the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, is about the contributions, the patriotism, the connection of Black people to this country. And so is Juneteenth, to say that we are free, we are here, we are part of the belonging of this nation. So there's constant connections. So there's not one way to celebrate Juneteenth. But I think, well, I take that back. There is a way of just recognizing that betrayal is real, that why didn't we learn about it as children, not just our geographical location. I'm from the North as well, but it took me until adulthood to know, and then to constantly be asked every year, what is Juneteenth? The Hamilton Hill Art Center has been doing a Juneteenth celebration locally for many years here, and the turnout has been growing steadily, but usually it's like, why? What is this? What's going on? What's happening? And I think the more that people realize and know what it is, they see it as a time of coming together and pausing, celebrating, and then saying, okay, how far have we come? You know, what is progress? What does freedom look like to me? So it's a cycle constantly.
And I hope for a day where my children would learn about it right from the beginning. The betrayal part of the things that we're learning, like Juneteenth, like Black Wall Street, right? Because that's another thing I didn't learn about until I was in college. Black Wall Street. And I remember sitting and go, why didn't anybody tell me about this? You know, and it wasn't that, I mean, yes, the horror of the massacre was one thing, and that, you know, I learned, but what I also learned in learning about Black Wall Street is that Black Wall Street was possible, that it was a real thing that happened, and that Black people could build up their communities and that were thriving and successful and circulated $1, you know, how many times in the community. So it was like, we actually did that. We were able to do that. And so it's when you hide the bad, you're also hiding the good about a thing.
That's a key point. I mean, I learned about Black Wall Street in college as well, but I also knew that we had done it before. And hearing about the domestic terrorism that happened to Black communities was a shock to see that.
I'm sorry, this is Sam. If I can maybe, there might be some folks on the line who don't know what Black Wall Street is.
Sure, I just put a link in the chat, but 100 years ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there was a town in Tulsa that had self-sustaining Black businesses, churches, banks, grocery stores, insurance agencies, self-sufficient. So this is post, 45, 50 years after slavery had ended, and there was migration from the South to the West, and Oklahoma was one of the first homesteading states. So you had a mixture of Native American and African Americans building businesses together. There was an accusal of a possible sexual assault by a white woman accused a Black man. That seems to be an ongoing, constant narrative that happens, and the majority white community members took it into their own hands to basically lynch the man without any justice being done. And then also within a matter of less than a day, the community, the Black community that I spoke of, was bombed. Hundreds were killed, shot, maimed in the streets, total chaos. And we are just acknowledging, we have, I think there are at least 5 living survivors of the massacre who testified recently in front of our, in Washington, telling their story. But even young adults and community members in Tulsa didn't know that this existed, that this had happened. There are community members who are from that area who went away to college and heard about the story, and it was washed away. Told so many of all these different parts of our heritage have, it's like the constant of American history is to say that everyone can pull themselves up from their bootstraps. Once you do, what's the backlash of that? But yes, so, and there's some great documentaries on the History Channel and others recently that have talked about the massacre on Black Wall Street.
And when Dr. Butler says bomb, we mean bomb from the air. We're not talking about cocktail bombs that somebody threw in the window. We're talking about they
military
flew
strike.
planes, military strike bombed. So very, much planned and strategic, and it happened. So there's another question from Father Green about how to handle and cope with or help those who are hostile to the truth of history to really hear and learn.
That's a great question.
Yeah. So when you asked that question, I was looking at it for a second, because how do you help anybody who's in denial? Because that's what came to me, is denial. It's like, okay, denial. But then I also understand that to walk away from, abandon, whatever, the beautiful, pretty American history that you're told, to look at the honest truth it's difficult. And it's not just difficult for some. It's not just difficult for those whose ancestors came over on the Mayflower or came to Ellis Island. It's difficult for a lot of us, because it's not just difficult for you to hear it, it's difficult for me to hear it as well. Although my ancestry and narrative is different. But the thing about a lie, first of all, let's call it what it is, okay? Because some of the history that's told in America is a lie. And the only way to confront lies is with truth. But if someone tells a lie long enough, people will believe it's the truth. So now that you're telling the truth, you got to tell the truth long enough for them to know it's the truth. That makes sense? So one, you have to be brave enough to continue to tell the truth, even when you're confronted with the hostility. And then in some ways, I think we have, well, I don't know, it's hard for me to I don't want to pacify people, but you try to honor that people are going through their own little grieving process of giving up, the red, white, and blue, good old boy, they giving up son here. I try to understand that you're going through that, but it's hard for me because I've been American for 41 years and had never fully felt American, and that's real. So for you to tell me, you're upset because I'm telling you that Thomas Jefferson raped a child rather than had a sweet, loving affair, what do you want me? I have to tell you the truth. And while I understand that you're giving up the image that you may have had of these American heroes, or what you perceive to have been American heroes, you're trying, it's like I'm painting that hero that you had to be a villain. It hurts. And I get that. I don't know, you might have to take over Dr. Diedre, because there's
No,
only but
no,
so much. There's only but so much. I only have but
I
so
know.
much tolerance for like fragility. I have to be honest with you. And I get to a
No,
point where I'm just like,
speak to it.
okay, you're gonna have to deal.
But as director of Africana Studies at a predominantly white college that has a history of not having a large population of students of color or faculty or staff of color, and talking about the resilience and the contributions of people in various ways, there's hostility constantly, and it does weigh on you. And I think your point about the truth and constantly telling the truth and understanding that it's very complex. Truth is complex, and it's not an individual situation. I mean, you said something key when you were describing Black Wall Street about the intentional abuse and, you know, demolition, destruction of the narrative of Black self-resilience and community cohesiveness, because we seem to be stuck on this story that Black people constantly need help and aren't self-sufficient. And that's not the story. That's not the reality. The ending of slavery, all the different struggles that have happened, it's been in combination and coalition with others who are like-minded to say, let's have a community, let's have a country where all voices are heard. Let's come together, let's stop the divisions, and let's work together so we can create spaces where we all feel we all are included and we have belonging. And you're right about the point about fragility. It's strong, it's hard to deal with, but that's why I call myself a sociologist of Black resilience. I focus on, how we get through that, how we get through this pain of the revelations of the lie, and how do we continue to help each other to manifest the best and the most that each of us brings to this life that we have. I find it fantastic that a health providing institution, right, would have conversations like this. So we can, because there are so many inequities and issues with healthcare delivery, right? There's been disparities that COVID has really brought to the forefront. But I'm really prideful in knowing that at the beginning when the vaccines came out, when Ellis was giving these, rendering the service of getting your vaccine, church communities, different aspects of our local community had access. It was on the forefront of this agency. I think that came from a lot of people understanding the past where we didn't have that situation. Right? We weren't included. So there's change up front, but much work still to do. So I think a solution in getting through this is to cleave together, keep discussing and strategizing on looking at the gaps and how we can fill them.
Right. And also, yes, and how we can fill them and how you can still honor the history despite having to tell the truth, right? So Father Green, Chaplain Richard, for example, right? How do you tell people that we can still celebrate Christmas even though Jesus wasn't born on December 25th? Right? Because we know he was not born on December 25th, but we still celebrate Christmas. And so when I tell that truth, which is I'll tell you, we're gonna still have a Christmas tree up and we're gonna do the stuff we do. But but we know, but it's like, can we still celebrate Jesus' birth? Yes, we can celebrate Jesus' birth. It's, nothing technically wrong with celebrating Jesus' birth, but there's also nothing wrong with being honest and saying he was not, the likelihood of him being born in December, not great. Okay. And so when you're telling the truth about American history, it is okay to be honest and to say that, yes, the Emancipation Proclamation was given. Yes, the Union, the one Confederacy lost, blah, blah. But the truth is that it took two and a half more years for that information to get everyone. That's the truth. And the truth is it was probably deliberate. That's the truth. So you tell the truth while still finding reasons, you can still find reasons to celebrate. And you were celebrating the wrong thing, So that's it.
So even if we haven't made it yet, we still celebrate the process. We
There you go.
celebrate the
Yeah.
steps that we make each go round, right? So you come to these events, you celebrate Black culture and contribution and community, even though it's right now there's a struggle going on right now, but at least you have points of discussion and conversation and celebration, and stay lifted.
I like to always tell people when I'm out doing teaching as a pastor, research and verify. Don't just listen to what I'm telling you or what somebody else is telling you. Do your own research.
Do your own. Don't trust Google 100% though.
Yeah.
At least get 3 sources.
Right.
If you're looking at a topic, do 3. I'll throw my professor hat on there. Find maybe a Google source and a old-fashioned old book. Visit our local libraries. Go in there and touch a book. It's just a good thing. And see what else is around in that area. Talk to people that you would deem experts in the area, and do not put aside the elders, family members that you have that have lived through and have seen and observed changes, right? Things locally, revere what's local to you, but also be open to travel, be open to investigate for yourself. There's resources galore. That's the thing. Good information is really everywhere. And the way media is set up now, it's so siloed that you're getting one message one place and another. So you have to, broaden it up and try to get balanced information. So you put, Howard Zinn's work, excellent scholar, activist, talking about the people's history is a great source, but there's so many other texts and individuals who've researched what's happened in the past, but the workers who are doing the tasks right now to try to make us, help us to all be better, is at our forefront as well.
If I can add to what Father Green has said about doing the research for yourself, which I think is key. It's super important. And thank you, Dr. Butler, for suggesting that we, get various sources and make sure that you're getting reliable sources when you're doing that research. In the process of doing that, though, I think I would like for us to honor each other's experiences. What I mean by that is if someone comes up to you who is an Indigenous person, a Native American, and they're telling you this is their experience, don't say, that's not your experience. That could not have happened in America. What? And that's hurtful sometimes to those in the Black community. It bothers me when I tell someone, racism exists and they want to tell me what my experience is as a Black person in America. It's like, no thanks, and then they might research it themselves and then come back and go. I remember I had a friend call me after George Floyd died. She was crying in tears. We've had conversations about racism all the time. She did not realize some of the things that I had said to her years ago until she saw George Floyd die on camera and then called me crying. I'm sorry I had that argument with you back in 2013 about racism not existing in America. It was just like, okay, I'm glad you came to that realization. And I'm not just saying this for Black Americans because we're talking about Juneteenth, but I'm talking about anybody's experience. It is not my place to tell a LGBTQ person. It is not my place to tell a Indigenous person. It's not my place to tell a Black person. And we like to do that sometimes to marginalize communities. I've never heard somebody, tell somebody Irish not to celebrate something Irish. I just haven't, but I hear it all the time in the Black community. Y'all don't even need to have Black History Month. Isn't Black history American history? Why I gotta go through this with you? So, do the research yourself, but until you come into the knowledge of those things, please don't cancel people's experiences and what they're saying to you, because that's their experience.
And the flip side of that, take the time to talk to people. Don't just go social media route and all this. We are in spaces all the time. I mean, things are opening up. You can go to, we live in our county, or at least our city, is very diverse. There's spaces you never thought you could visit. The doors are open, or will be eventually. At least the Zoom is open to visit different churches and or go to city council meetings every Monday night on Zoom, just to hear what's going on, what's happening in my community. How can I get to know my neighbor, differently, and just listen and hear what the different experiences are, and don't just make quick judgments. We have to take the time to get to know each other. I think the slowing down through this COVID pandemic has allowed some to ponder and to think about the relationships they have with their fellow neighbor, and just redefine what neighbor is, and that we all need each other. When we have those major snowstorms, we come out, we shovel together, and you meet people you hadn't talked to in six months or since the last storm. And maybe, and we were checking on each other at the early parts of COVID to see if people needed things. I mean, that's the true spirit of all this. Yes, there's been lies, betrayal, deceit, but to progress and move forward we have to acknowledge that all of this has taken place and is still in action now, but we can do better. We can do better. It takes work, and you may get hurt in the process, but we can do better. So there's sources. I'm a plugger and a lover of the library, reading things. There's so many podcasts. There's, events like this where we can come together, you can hear and listen to questions and discussions. How can Ellis? Oh, Sam's asking a question. You're a great neighbor for me because I'm just down the street. But no, I love Ellis. Ellis all the time. No, actually, I'm not. Thank goodness, I'm not Ellis all the time. Continuing having discussions and dialogues like this, and continue to partner with other community agencies and groups. And so you're hearing as many voices as possible, and celebrate all those different voices, because we all need wellness. We all need care, right? And I think it's really timely that you're having a discussion about PTSD at this time, because we're connected. We're all in this together.
I think the question about how can we spread the knowledge and the importance of Juneteenth, one is to reach out to your representatives that are presently having that discussion in Congress, so that they know that it's important to you that this be a national holiday, if that is something that you want to see, as it is something I want to see. So that would be one. Also attend celebrations such as this, and then I know they're having one on Friday and Saturday. Friday is it's a Vale Cemetery.
Vale Cemetery. They're acknowledging there was a Black plot at Vale Cemetery, so there's usually a celebration there to acknowledge the residents who've lived here and contributed there. And then on Saturday from 1 to 7 in Central Park at the main stage, there's events, vendors, dance party line, soloists, food vendors, and people selling wares. I think Carla Page is singing, a whole bunch of different activities. That's hosted by the Hamilton Hill Art Center. And then in Albany, the African American Cultural Center, they're blocking off the street in front of the African American Cultural Center. They just revealed a huge mural of Angela Davis and Malcolm X on the side of their building down there. And there too will be speakers, events, that type of thing. So just going and supporting, being visible.
I just finished reading, listen to it, it was on Audible, the autobiography of Malcolm X. And it really impressed, I highly recommend it for anybody. It was riveting and just provoked so much in me. But there was one part, just in reference to some of the things you're talking about, where he traveled to Mecca, and he talked about that he experienced in that place where race really was not at the forefront of everything in people's lives as it was in America. And it really changed his mind about his what he thought about white people, and said that indeed there could be some good white people, because his experiences and he came through some really hard experiences. I guess my question is, do you think we will ever in the USA get to a place of, and some people have already said we're a post-race, division, post-racial division nation. We're not, I know. But do you ever think we might get to a place in whatever time period that where we don't have these
it's not
divisions?
post-racial division. It's we want to be acknowledged. You want to acknowledge the cultural strengths of people. You don't want to be blind. There's no such thing as racial blindness, but we have to question some of the scripts and narratives that have been planted in our mind from our own family members, our school experiences, the media, about groups of people. We need to get to know and meet people on a basis of that you understand they're part of cultures, but there's more about us that's connected, that's that we can care about and connect with. But you also have to acknowledge that the legacy of the past and policies still are functioning that keep us at different levels.
Separated, yeah.
Yeah. And so I mean, I think the autobiography of Malcolm X is a great text.
Incredible.
That revelation, he wasn't really thinking, at least in my perspective from thinking about that text or his perception of the change. Going to Mecca, he saw that humanity had the capability of coming together.
Yeah.
And so that's like more of an elevation of hope, that if we work together and do the work that we've been talking about this time together, acknowledging the past, understanding truth and truths that people have lived through and are experiencing on a constant basis. Think about your fellow human being, with dignity, and a sense of compassion and connection as well. All that takes work in a society where we are just so busy and we're just revving and going, and our focus is in other places. I think that's why I really think this time of COVID helped us maybe take a little bit of a pause. It was very uncomfortable for most of us to be on that pause, but it's okay to be uncomfortable. You have to be okay with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's scary to meet somebody or go somewhere you usually don't go. You may not know someone and that type of thing, but take the courage to do that, and have a dialogue and discussion and come with a pure thought there. But I also say with that, don't go to every brown friend that you know and ask them, what do you think about this? Because that could be a little taxing. That could be a little, so do the investigation, do the studying on your own, read great books. There's so much out there.
I pick and choose my days. I'm only open on Tuesday and Thursday.
Exactly. Right. The other days, I don't want to talk about it. I just, I need a break.
Today.
I need not today. But I'm saying, like, read the book. We have the canons of books. We have the documentaries. Seriously, about visiting the library. Go to website. There's so much out there that you can do. It's not just one thing. It's not just one story. This is a collage of information, and it takes work.
I'm hopeful. I have to remain hopeful that we can get to that place. I think that's the Christian, the Christian believing, we can do this in me, that says we can get to that place. I also know that we as a country keep going through like repeated trauma that is not serving that. So like one of the things that one of the activists said and I'm speaking specifically of Schenectady in our community, when we were going through the whole police reform thing and the George Floyd protests and all of those things, one of the things that was said, and I'm not saying anything negative about our chief, of police, but one of the things the activist said is that, one of his responses to them is we have to get over the past when we were talking about police reform. If y'all read the paper, y'all read that comment. And I thought to myself, what a horrible response. to say we got to get over the past. But when you say that to marginalized folks in America, what past are you talking about? You telling us to get over slavery? Me and none of my friends sit around and talk about slavery. We don't sit down around and talk about how horrible was slavery. We don't have that conversation. We do talk about George Floyd. We do talk about Trayvon Martin. So what history exactly are you talking about when you say we got to get over it? So it's a repeated trauma thing that goes on that I think is not serving us well when we talk about moving forward. Is that we have to keep ripping off Band-Aids, is that we have to keep going through these things over and over again. And then it almost feels like, because we don't want to be honest in that moment. I think the best thing we can do is be honest in those moments when those things happen. It was encouraging that when George Floyd, and I keep going to him because I think that's the moment that we're still in, that when George Floyd was murdered, I think it was encouraging that people who had never said Black Lives Matter before finally said it because they understood that it needed to be said. But then what's discouraging is that you will still have people that will scream All Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter when we actually need it in that moment for all of you to say Black Lives Matter. So in each moment, in each thing that happens, I think that more of us need to find ourselves siding with those who are oppressed, marginalized, or hurt in that moment. You know, the whole example of the house, the house that's burning. You don't put the water on the house that's not on fire. We need everybody throwing buckets of water over here right now. And in America, we kind of trip over that a lot. So I hope that we can get to that place, but certainly the repeated trauma, I think is what's not.
And the work needs to be done, the acknowledging of what the past is. So when you have these police chiefs, it may not be here in Schenectady, but in other municipalities that are acknowledging that we've done some wrong, right? We've done some wrong, and let's look at some reforms. Let's look at some trainings. Let's investigate. Let's see what community relations are like. What does our police force look like? I mean, I'm old enough to remember Rodney King and what happened with him. And if you look at the LA police force today, from 1991 to today, there's more women, there's more people of color. There's still discrepancies, there's still issues, but at least you're making some points of progress. And so we should have some type of markers to say, how are we going to move from this step to this step? And I think holding our elected officials accountable is key. Holding our leaders of different organizations and institutions is key. This should be on their agenda to have more belonging and inclusion and equitable practices in every institution. That's how we get to the next mark. Having discussions and putting the plans in place and having different voices at the table to make those decisions. And so if you are from a group that has been historically privileged, to at least have some dialogues, discussions on your advisory teams from different community, and neighborhood connections, so you get to hear the voices of your constituents. So if I'm the president of a certain institution, I should have my advisory board look like those who are working with me in a journey. That's a leadership that's just more equitable. And actually you'll find it's more profitable if that's, if you really want to bring it that way. Yeah, so we can do better. It's hard to keep hope though. It's hard because what you said about the psyche of things, the Band-Aid being ripped off or the scab being picked, that's how all this, it's draining. Are you muted? What'd you say? What'd you say?
So we've earned a vacation. It is.
Everyone earns a vacation. That's why they should have Juneteenth as a holiday. Everyone's, no.
But and I think that it is so important that we look again at the history, because to change the historical narrative changes the present narrative. if we can honestly, if we can honestly look at the history, so why is it, what I mean by the present narrative is that addiction in the Black community is still a crime, but in the white community, it's an illness. That's what I mean by the present narrative. Okay. Why is it that it can be looked at that way? Is because of the way that the history was painted to make Black people seem as if they have all these extra issues, or they're lazy, or they're this, they're that. What if you knew that we actually weren't lazy? We built a whole entire community that was burnt to the ground. If you knew the honest truth, if you knew the honest history, it would change the present narrative, because you would know who we really are and how beautiful all of us are. That's why I always try to highlight that Doryi Memorial is named after Isaac Doryi, because I want to highlight that part of our history to say that there was a time in Schenectady where a white Dutch preacher purchased land for the Black residents of this city so that we would have a place to worship. I think that's an important part of our history. And so I have to tell the whole history there, because I don't want people to think that, you know, it's a historical Black church. And sometimes people look at historical Black things as us trying to separate ourselves. First of all, nothing historically Black was ever created because we were trying to separate ourselves. We literally could not go to white schools. And so we created our own. We couldn't worship at white churches, so we created our own, right? But to tell the story of Isaac Doryi is to show unity. And so when you don't tell the entire history, it sneaks its way into our present and distorts our narratives that we have today.
And I always love to throw in that Isaac Doryi was a Union student that connected with the Black community and the small numbers of Black folk here in Schenectady. So I always have to say, you know, Union has a Black history. There's a connection. And I get stares all the time. All the time. Right here, we're all in this together. We're all in this space together. And all the different, so many of the struggles and the triumphs have been out of coalition and connection. But it's listening. It's everyone at the table. It's work. It's work.
Yeah, we're coming up on 12:20, and I just want to know, thank you so much, first of all, for everything that you're prompting lots of thoughts for me, and I'm sure for many others that, you know, I want to go and learn more and see us grow and do community better together. What do you think is necessary or needed in the healthcare community when it comes to, what do you have any recommendations for us at Ellis as far as diversity, health equity, and inclusion? What can we do?
I think so. I guess something that we've seen during the COVID pandemic is that there needs to be discussions about, we know a little bit about the history, but there's something that has to be done to bridge that gap between distrust and healthcare with our communities. I think we kind of know that, you know, because of what we witnessed on COVID. So I think discussions like that would be very helpful. And then another thing that I've been thinking about since this pandemic is that, you know, some folks didn't know that their pre-existing conditions were pre-existing conditions until COVID. and so, no, these things have never been healthy for us. And so now we need to be educated on preventing, you know, how do we prevent diabetes from being so prevalent in our communities? How do we prevent? So I would love to see it, and I would attend, you know, if we had those kind of discussions, because none of us want to get, I felt like it caught communities that suffer with those things off guard. Like, we didn't know how serious it was until there was a virus that came along that could take you out, you know? So yeah.
Yes, and having, you know, more cultural competency, you know, more employees, staff, and leadership positions that look like the communities they're serving, and just, you know, working with the policy problems and issues with insurance and having access. Those are key points. But yeah, education, connecting more. Yeah, I already know there's healthcare connections in the schools and that type of thing. You know, hometown health is in the high school, but there needs to be just more and more support for those who are doing those delivery services. I know when we had our we did the COVID vaccinations at Diedre, we had the Black Nurses Association came and they delivered. They were there, you know, that using their resources to connect to the community and maybe building up those type of groups and supporting those women and men that they're on the front lines even more. So I know it already happens because I know you're already a partner with Juneteenth in Schenectady and being visible. So we see that our hospital isn't just the place where you go when you're sick.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, for more instruction and more connections, and an institution that's at all parts of our lives, not just at our beginning and our end. You know, what's happening in between. You know, just go to the hospital. Because with my background, my family would be like, "Oh, don't go to the hospital because that's where you die." It's like, no, you go to the hospital for your checkups. You go to the hospital, you know, for instruction and information and all that, and just, you know, keeping those connections more vibrant.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else have questions out there?
I don't have a question, but just quick, I'm Jenny Nicolle. I'm one of the vice presidents here at the hospital. I just want to thank you both for taking the time today. Such crucial conversation. And I want this to be ongoing. I want us to continue this dialogue. I think we have great teams behind this that are really continuing to push to make sure that we continue to have these conversations, that we're being supportive. We're trying to educate wherever we can, and not be critical of individuals as well as they have questions or maybe even concerns as we celebrate different things or discuss different things. So a lot of great conversation happening, and this today was spot on. It was great, and I'd love to see more of this. I'd love to have both of you back to support us in other ways as well. So on behalf of all of us at Ellis, thank you for everything. We really appreciate it.
Yes, amen. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up because we're right at 1:30, and gosh, it's been wonderful. We had a great representation of people on listening, and I don't think we could have had two better speakers. And I'm glad Jenny's thrown out that invitation to have you come back. And we hope everybody has a great day. Take all this and ponder it in your thoughts. Do the research. Talk to your neighbors, and
hope to see you Saturday in Central Park.
Yeah, yes.
Come on
Look
back.
that up. Come out and enjoy.
Exactly.
All right. God bless you both. Thanks.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
God bless.
Bye-bye.